Hello and welcome to this episode of A Facilitator's Journey. Today I'm interviewing one of my probably oldest friends who I've known for 19 years through business. His name is Mok O'Keefe. We have worked together, played together, cried together, drunk together, partied hard together. So it's really wonderful that I get to talk to him today and for him to share parts of his story with you. So you know the drill, team, by now. Grab a cup of tea, your drink of choice, come join me on the picnic seat and tune in your ears. Hey, Mok.
Hello. Oh, how nice to see you.
And you. Welcome to A Facilitator's Journey. A question I ask every guest: how do we know one another?
Oh, we go way back to my corporate consulting days when I worked for an innovation agency in central London, and you came in as a client from your days at Diageo. And I remember it was quite late, I think maybe even on a Friday evening, and we had an amazing meeting with loads of energy. And when you left, I thought, oh, I know she might be a client. I think I won that. But I quite like her as a friend.
And it sort of happened, didn't it? Because that was 2006. Wow. 20 years ago.
Yeah. And then I went off to New York very soon after that. Yeah. So, yeah. And we went and locked ourselves away because you didn't have very long for your project. We went and locked ourselves away in a cottage in the countryside and had like personal trainers come in and people feed us. And we solved the problem.
We did. And you introduced me to my personal trainer, Divan.
The Divine Divan.
The Divine Divan. We love Divan. And then we became friends. And I got to travel. I came to New York for work and I got to hang out with you.
Yeah. And then you came to my wedding, of course, as well.
I did.
So life's very different from when we first met, but it's lovely to know that because people do come and go. It's lovely to know we don't see each other all the time. We do text and follow each other on Instagram, but it's lovely just to know that you're a consistent person there in my life.
Indeed. Very lucky. Very lucky.
I remember when you first came down to our house in Gloucestershire and you were starting School of Facilitation, I showed you how to set it up on Twitter.
You did. Let's just be clear, I'm no longer on that platform.
Neither am I.
I don't think any of us are. And then I'm sure there was another conversation we had when I ended up talking about finances with you, and we were talking about profit first as a system.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So as you can hear, people, there is a lot of history between Mok and I. So Mok, how do you describe what you do? Because you are in this world that we talk about.
Yeah, so I lead a company called the Innovation Beehive, and we exist to release the creative potential of people at work. My background, I was a CPO, I worked in innovation consulting, and that interconnection between leadership, culture, and innovation growth in organizations is where our sweet spot is. And it can be really broad. It can be helping with culture transformation, it can be helping with DE&I, it can be helping with new products and services. It's often now got a real strong people focus because that's something I'm really, really passionate about. And the business has been going since about 2008, 9, something like that. And as I'm sure we'll talk about, I'm slowly transitioning out of it by choice.
So you said, it started 2008, 2009. And at that time, you were living in London. Is that correct?
Yes, I'd just come back from New York. I had moved back. My brother was unwell. I came back to the London office and we had the global crash. I had a couple of years previously bought a news house in South Kensington because I was doing incredibly well, wasn't I? With a massive mortgage. I came back unexpectedly to the UK when my brother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And I lost my job. And then I lost my brother, I lost my father, and I lost the house. I actually ended up selling it for less than I bought it for and moving out of an area I had lived in for about 20 years. I bought my first flat a couple of streets away. I'd upgraded and I got to the point where I couldn't afford the house that I'd been in previously. But I couldn't get a job. And also I had my brother's children to support, my sister-in-law, my mother for another 14 months. I was her sole carer. I couldn't really get a full-time job and there weren't any. So I decided I needed something to keep me that wasn't about children or mothers or grief or wills or trying to buy houses. And so I founded the Innovation Beehive, and I would not say never looked back, but it's certainly one of the most amazing things
It's
I
been a
ever
roller
did. And I'm
coaster.
really grateful that it's got me to where I am, which is in a little castle in Wales, about to go into the next chapter of my life.
I know. We're going to talk about that. So we've spoken to other people about scaling up and growing the business, but one of the conversations, I remember this really clearly during COVID, that we had was you sort of declaring that potentially you were going to scale back
Yeah.
the Innovation Beehive. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, like, but I thought the thing was to grow and to go big. What drove that thinking?
Well, you're right. I always thought of it as a company. I mean, I remember the first day I changed my LinkedIn profile. I had a date that night with this guy. He said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a management consultancy." You know, it was me in a kitchen in South Kensington. But I always had a sense of the company. And we did get to the point where my husband, who joined the business fairly soon after I met him, we were together before he joined the business. We had 7 people working for us. We had an office in Cirencester. We had a small show care sort of shared working space in Kensington and London. We were working all over the world. We were considering a New York office, and we were talking to people who had scaled their businesses and sold them, and we're looking at how we could get to a point where we get like a £4 or £5 million possible exit for us in a couple of years' time. And then COVID hit. We most of our contracts just disappeared. We went from earning a really good salary for everyone in the business and some good profits to earning £3,000 a month. And I stayed at home in Gloucestershire. And that's what happened, Kirsty. I would do 8 o'clock on a Monday morning. I would go and work in the office for a one-to-one, having worked on Sunday till 6:30. That's when I cut off. Didn't work Saturdays. I then would finish about 6, drive to London, open my laptop about 10 o'clock at night and work for a bit. And I would then work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I'd come home on Friday. I would often be in 3 or 4 beds in a week, traveling, billing, almost acting like I was in the business as opposed to managing it. We'll talk about issues later. And I would come home, eat a bag of crisps and go to bed for 2 hours. Then be exhausted on Saturday, try and get my crap together on Sunday with finances, and then do it all again. During COVID, I was at home and I was with my husband and my dogs, and I started to look after my health a bit more. I wasn't eating on the go all the time. I've got colitis. I need to manage myself with medication. I needed less of that. And I started to think, we'll get through this at some point. I don't know what that's going to look like. But is this an opportunity to examine my life? I think it was Aristotle said, a life not worth examining is a life not worth living. And so I really looked hard at it and said, whilst I'm worried about money, I had lost everything in 2010. I had, as I said, lost the job, lost the house. I was living on £20 a week at one point. I was absolutely penniless. And I had a real fear of losing all the stability again. But I thought, rather than go to a place of fear, go to a place of exploration. What kind of life do I want? Because I'm the king of reinvention. I'm always about taking a pen and writing the next chapter of your life and not letting events, dear boy, write them for you. And at that point, I realized what I was enjoying most was being with my family in Gloucestershire. I still have commitments with my brother's children. I consider them my girls. I'm very involved in their upbringing. I'm taking the twins to New York in a couple of weeks once they finish their GCSEs, back to go on half term. And so I just realized I can't have this and have scale.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be all right financially. If I'm not, I will do what I need to do. I mean, during the recession, I delivered free newspapers. No one knows. I used to get a bus to Hammersmith and deliver the free newspapers. I will do anything to make sure I have income and remain employed. My parents were immigrants here who worked really hard, but I really wanted to be home and have a sense of place and not be traveling all the time. I'm still traveling a little bit more than I want, but that was what made me think I don't need to scale. And the journey and the vision and the story I had written for myself, I didn't have to stick to.
Exactly. And we don't have to stick. I think there's a lot of people who stay on a path because they believe that that's what they have to do. And I think especially we see that in corporate land, but I think we sometimes forget when we have our own businesses that we can just rewrite it anytime we want.
Mm.
I often like groan at the diary I have created for myself sometimes, because I'm like, but the only person who did that, Kirsty, was you. Like, it's not like there's this other person
I
floating
agree.
around.
Absolutely. And
And so
that,
it's
that
up to
that
us.
ability to the ability to really examine your narrative and take control of it. I mean, I'm 55 now, I'll be 56 this year. You know, I lost a brother at 44. I lost my parents within a year of each other. So I feel I am lucky to be here. I feel I owe it to my brother, particularly, to
Mm.
live the best possible life and also continue to evaluate what success is within that life. And success wasn't necessarily the getting to a 5 million exit. Success was being able to go to Pilates this morning, which I did in a
Yeah.
village in Usk up the road on a Friday morning.
And just enjoy that. So, because as we've said, we both know each other well. So even I was surprised when you said, I'm actually going to work out not necessarily how to grow, but how to scale back. And it's almost like I was sat in my old house and you were like, we're at the garden centre. We were having this conversation. You were in the car park in the garden centre. I remember this.
Of course.
And what was it? And I know, what was it? Was there like a particular moment where you were just like, yeah, I'm done with this? Or was it a build up of events?
I think it was probably a build up of events. It was certainly, you know, that realizing that whilst I was scared like everyone in lockdown and I was concerned about money, I was really enjoying being in one place. So the traveling, and I still have a flat in London. I still go there. But actually, even over the last few months, I'm going 3 days a week from June. The last few months, I've absolutely cut down the amount of travel. I don't intend to be in London now for at least another 3 weeks. So I also was pretty unhealthy. I tried really hard. I had a gym membership. I had PT trainers. So in London, sometimes I would be on a Tuesday morning meeting a personal trainer at 5 a.m., having worked until 11 on my emails because I had to get a meeting. And then Tuesday night, I might be flying to Glasgow. I tried, but I was unhealthy. I was overweight. I wasn't managing my medical condition. I was quite stressed. That led to me smoking a lot. I don't drink, but had an unhealthy lifestyle. And I used to be the HR director for KFC and Pizza Hut. I'm not going to lecture anyone about nutrition. And I believe as part of a healthy, balanced diet, the occasional treat is perfectly acceptable. But I don't think I was thinking about my health. I mean, I'm vegan now. I don't drink alcohol. I don't smoke. I go to the gym 4 times a week. I do Pilates on a Friday. I was far away from the person I am now, but I could see where it was going, and I didn't like the way I looked, and I was exhausted, and I was living a very superficial life where I had lots of very top-line connections with people, but I didn't feel any depth or sense of place.
Thank you for sharing that. That's very honest. I wonder how many of us, if we truly paused and like gave ourselves some scores out of 10 on, like you're saying, like what we eat, how we look after ourselves mentally, emotionally, physically, and those points of connection.
But organizations have balanced scorecards. We need them for ourselves. And I do have a bit of a balanced scorecard for myself. And I will be honest and say the financial one is important. You know, I did lose, I didn't grow up very rich. My early career, I was talking to Joe about my husband the other day about when I was working at Harrods as a graduate trainee and I didn't have very much money, I remember getting ill and having to get prescriptions and not having the money. So having to put my prescription on a credit card and things like that. So, and I said I was living on 20 quid a week in the early 2000s in the recession. And then during COVID, I was really worried. I had outgoings on a property in London, a property in Gloucestershire. They're good for me. Hurrah, I've got 2 properties, but they cost thousands and I wasn't earning anything like that. So having that stability now, but also examining what do I actually need? What do you really need? What's your budget? What do you need for the next 20, 30 years? That's given me the springboard to be able to make every other choice, because my therapist would say, I have spent the last 15 years running away from one particular night. It was in my Muse in South Kensington, which you remember there were steps up to the front door. I was sitting in a deck chair, smoking with a glass of wine, of course. and I was trying to send an email to a client, and I was too poor. I didn't have any internet. And I was trying to jump on the local Starbucks, which was one street away's internet, to send an email. And I looked around, and I was about to complete on the sale of the house the next day. And I felt the biggest failure I've ever felt in my life. And partly the life up till COVID was me running away from that moment and making sure, in the words of Scarlett O'Hara, I will never be poor again.
Yeah.
But that led me into some choices that I don't think really served Mock and my health and my relationships.
And I think we all do it though in different ways, don't we? There's often in NLP we talk about meta programming. So there's an away from and a towards program. And I mean, I've had many away from programming in the past, and probably many of us still do. We just don't. They're just all
the trouble is, the dilemma, lots of us, I believe, facilitators, trainers, whoever we are, we enjoy it. So I really love what I do. I might be like moaning about my diary, and then I will get on a coaching call with the head of D&I for a global organization. And I'm not going to be arrogant. I'll be really good, and she'll get to a really good place after the conversation. I'll put the phone down and go, I did good. And I'll go, but I'm really knackered. And so it's that. And I'm quite lucky. I'm on my last big consulting gig now. And it's for a CEO I've known for a number of years. It's for his hotel chain. They own historic properties. So I love historic properties. I live in one. I love hospitality. I love the CEO. I have my last big gig. I am more energized about than I have been in any gig, I'd say, for the last 5-6 years. And I think that's the universe giving me a blessing to say, well done. I'm going to give you great fun on the way out, and then go and do the Airbnb, go and play with your social media, go and write the book.
Go right book. How have you scaled? Because we're at its peak, Innovation Beehive was, as you say, excuse the pun, buzzing.
We were buzzing with ideas, as I believe.
I remember this, and that's okay. It's creative. So how have you scaled back? Like, what intentional steps did you take?
So it was about spreadsheets. I've got to be really honest. Firstly, it was, I know, look at you and spreadsheets and money. It was real. It was saying, what are my outgoings?
Okay.
It's a thing I'm about to do again next week. Now that it's just my husband and I, and he's transitioning out of the business. He's qualified as a personal trainer. He's starting to do that. I'm transitioning out of the business as well. And then there will be no business.
Yeah.
So it was saying, what do we spend? That was the big thing. I would say there was a piece in front of that, though, is what kind of life do we want to live? Yeah. So I know I want to live in the countryside, but I didn't really want to let go of a home in London at the moment. That's still a debate, and I'm getting closer to not having a foot there. I wanted to make sure I was still, we talked about moving to France and buying a chateau. And I was like, but I'm going to be too far away from the girls. I left London. I can't leave the country because they lost their dad. I can't do that to them. There's something, the optics. And also I want to be able to, as I have done, if there's something wrong with the child, get in a car and be 3 hours later next to them in a bedroom, whether it's at school or whether it's in London. So those things are really important. But having a vision around countryside, together, some land, being not worried about having to hunt the next piece of work, having a bit of security around that. How do you get security? Well, where are we now? What are our outgoings? What are we committed to? What does that look like in terms of headcount? Well, do we need that headcount if you want a slightly smaller life? Do we need to do these big £250,000 projects if we're going to have, less mortgage and that sort of thing? And that led us to then selling our house in Gloucestershire, which was the home that my husband and I moved into the week we got married. You've been there, Georgian rectory style, absolutely gorgeous. I bought a little cottage in the village, and then, a few years later, fell in love, and we bought the big house. Yeah. And that wasn't a fire sale. That was actually, we're sitting on equity here. You want to be nearer your family in Wales. As long as I'm no more than 1 hour more away from where we are now, I can get to the girls or London. Yeah. That will give us stability. And that's how we came to buy this place.
So I think it's really interesting. It's like the steps you're saying, though, it was a case of you got to do that visioning piece first. So what is the life you want to have? So really get clear on what that looks like, sounds like, feels like. And then it is doing the maths of like, so how much do we need a month, a quarter, a year, and
Mm.
therefore what does that then mean in terms of projects and the money that needs to come in, and then there's all the maths in between on the taxes and
Oh
the
yeah, and then
joys of
there's
that.
also a transition, because now, for example, we're not fully there. This gig that I've got, I call it a gig, but this piece of this client work that I've got will probably last till the end of the year,
Yeah,
and it may go on further. But what I am doing is, and Joe as well, we have taken less salary out of the business for the last 5 months. So I have continued to reduce the salary that I'm taking. I am starting to pay for a lot of things by cash. I used to have a Lamex card that I would spend everything on and it would come out as one big lump. No. Now I use a debit card or cash. I know exactly what I am spending. And again, I'm spending less and I am earning less. Now, it's theoretical. It's wooden dollars because the money is sitting in the business. I could extract it, but I'm just paying myself less salary and dividends. You know how it works. But to get myself used to the point where, if I don't have a booking in August in the stables Airbnb, I'm used to living on X amount of money. It's
exactly. Fine. Before though, you said you had a team of like 7. So
yeah,
how did you go from 7 to just you and Joe?
So I think COVID, it was natural attrition. A couple of people left during COVID. One decided they were going to leave the country, and they went and lived abroad. A couple of people I made redundant, or more than a couple. So ultimately, and then it's interesting because I've actually been hired back as the Innovation Beehive by one of my ex-team, and I'm currently working with her in her new role, which is quite exciting and quite lovely, a compliment. And that happened when I first started the business. People who had worked for me when I was an HR director or whatever I was in various roles, some of those people then become quite senior in their organizations, and they hired me when I first started the business. But yeah, so it was a mixture of a natural attrition because people went on to do other things or got new jobs during COVID or decided to leave the country, their own life plans, or a couple of people I made redundant. And that was tough because, everyone on here, if they were running a business at that time, we all got on Teams and got virtual, and we used to run virtual coffee mornings and all sorts of things. But most of us took out bounce back loans to fund whatever we needed to fund. I didn't take out a huge amount, but I used that money to fund redundancies for 4 members of the team.
Wow.
And they all went into other jobs immediately or started their own businesses. And I remember during the end of COVID, if you had employees, whilst they were furloughed, you still paid their national insurance contributions. You still paid their sick pay. You still paid their holiday entitlement, which when they left, they had to get paid for. So you had thousands of pounds worth of outgoing still, even though everyone was furloughed at home watching Netflix. I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, writing white papers and trying to save the company and trying to save myself because I had no income. I couldn't furlough myself. All my staff are getting 80%. I was getting nothing. So I'm still paying back a bounce loan. It's the great undiscussed issue of small business ownership. I use bounce back loans rightfully and legally to pay the redundancy of my staff who don't have the debt that I had and went straight into jobs. And I do think that is unfair because so much of the UK economy is driven by small business owners like you, me, and the people listening to this podcast.
I didn't have a team. I've never really had a team, as you know. I used my bounce back loan to do the rebrand that we can see around this screen right now.
I remember you discussing it with me. Yeah.
So in a way, I was lucky. That's how I used my loan. I'm still paying it back, obviously, like all of us that you've just said. But it's interesting, isn't it? Like, so it was that point at COVID that you were something like, no more. Imagine if we hadn't had COVID, like what would have happened?
I don't know. No, actually I wasn't, because there were some massive contracts that we had signed and clients walked away from. So, I mean, I there was a £250,000 project that was going to be happening just as COVID came in. I'd hired a member of staff on the back of that. We'd done stage 1. This was stage 2. It was a global project. I was going to be traveling around the world. In the end, we did some of it virtually, and it won Leadership Program of the Year. Can you imagine if we had actually, scaled it? So I knew that we had the opportunity to really scale the business. But what happened is a number of our clients, even if they were contracted to us, just said, we're not doing the work. And we
Yeah, I
were
think that
too
happens
small.
everywhere.
How do you go up against a multinational and say, I'll take you to court during a pandemic when we didn't know what was happening? And so you just had to say, okay,
Yeah.
right. And so our pipeline, which was about £480,000 worth of business that we were at various levels of believing we were landing, where it was a fairly good number, just disappeared, literally within
Wow.
days. Within days.
It's a horrible feeling.
It was horrible. And you go back to that night sitting in the Mews in South Kensington saying, oh my goodness, I have worked since I was 15 years old on the
Yeah.
butcher's counter at Sainsbury's Holloway Road. I've worked since I was 15. I'm going to lose it again. And I don't know if I have the capacity or the energy to rebuild this time. And I think that was it as well. Also, there was a little bit that said, I don't want to have that life. And I don't think I've got the energy to rebuild it again. I now want the energy to invest in my relationship and my home. I
Yeah.
haven't done, and invest in me.
You touch on something without realizing it, maybe, in that as business owners, our deepest fears and worries show up in our business and in ourselves, and that unresolved trauma can just keep pinging straight back at us. And I think because for many of us, our businesses are an extension of us, of our personalities. And one of my early guests, Simon and Jane, both of them, Simon and James, on different episodes, were talking about the benefit of having therapy and having like supervision, and how important that is, as whatever size your business is. And that has been super helpful. You mentioned earlier a therapist, so
yeah, I've had therapy. I had bereavement therapy, and I had some therapy recently to help me kind of figure out who do I want to be, and that's a really exciting question. But I'm bringing lots of baggage and stuff with it, and it's about that. An example of how that manifests in the business is, I think in the past I would have done anything for a client. And I would almost have accepted any sort of, I know what our day rates were, but, I could be perhaps negotiated down inappropriately by a client. But because I had that scarcity mindset, sitting on that Mews step in South Kensington, I'm going to lose my home tomorrow. Adam Ant lives there now, lucky man. Yeah. I'm going to lose my home tomorrow, and I've got no money, and I don't even have enough to buy a packet of Marlboro Lights. What am I going to do? It made me just chase the money all the time. And it was really interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I worked on a big project, last 2 years for a client. And it was horrific. And the last event was in January this year. We were abroad, and the behavior was poor. And he came back to me a couple of weeks ago and said, we'd like you to pitch to do this leadership program for us, big business, good money. And I just said no. And I mentioned it to my husband, because all financial decisions are joint. That's how a good relationship works. And I said, I don't really want to work with, he's asked me for it. And Joe says, yeah, but it was better. And I was like, oh. And he said, what do you think it's worth? I went, oh, I don't know. 80, 90, maybe 100, I don't know.
Yeah.
And he was like, but do you want to do it? And I said, absolutely not. And he said, well, you don't have to. And I said, yeah, I know. And I just said, I'm just not available. I'm going part-time. On June the 1st, I'm working 3 days a week. I've got 2 big clients and 1 coaching relationship. That's all I need now till the end of the year. I'm sorry, I have no more capacity. I'm building a YouTube, I'm doing some other stuff. So that's what's taking up my other time. However, here's an amazing person who'll be able to.
Yeah. I think so. How did you feel when you finally said no?
Really nervous, writing the email. I kept going, alarm, back to South Kensington. What are you doing? Oh my goodness. The universe is going to destroy you because of this. Like, I did not buy a coffee for about 8 years, because I literally thought, once I kind of got myself back on my feet again, I literally thought the universe is going to punish me for wasting money and make me poor again.
Oh, wow.
And I used to allow myself one coffee on the M4 as a very special treat when I was absolutely exhausted on my way to London to go and work for the week. And this is when I had, 7 people working for me, and I had a Georgian house in Gloucestershire. I was still
running.
I can't waste money because universe, God is going to punish me and send me back to that step in South Kensington.
Wow.
Yes, I've had therapy.
But all of us will have a version of that story that you've just shared, and thank you for sharing it. And just being able to say no to a client, I think, is a really important thing wherever we're at in our business journey and life cycle, because there are definitely going to be projects that people come to us with that are not our thing, are not our wheelhouse, or just totally inappropriate. But I know there will be people out there who have said yes to projects where they should have said a big fat no, because it's not it's not their thing, for one thing, but also probably capacity, or because they're running on that scarcity mindset. And if I say no, what's going to happen? It's all like the world's going to implode and I'll never get another job ever again.
Yeah, and the thing is, if we're any good, we will. But you always, again, taking it back to the maths, you need to have some sort of cushion. I could do that because I've managed my spreadsheet, because I know what my tax liability is going to be this quarter or next year, because I have a roundup account so that, everything over a pack gets popped in. And that's then when, it's 12 grand a year to heat this house. That helps contribute towards the oil in this house, those sorts of things.
That's a really good point about having a cushion within the business. It doesn't necessarily mean it's a cushion in your personal bank account.
No, it's not my money. It is not my money. It is that I never look at the business. I look at anything in the business account, I look at and take 40% off immediately. Yes. And then I also say, that's not my money. My money is the X amount I give myself each month as salary, and I'm reducing that over the 5 months.
That's really interesting, actually, because I probably don't think like that, because I still feel very responsible for the money I see in my business bank account. But you're right.
It's a corporate entity. That is the Innovation Beehive Limited money. I've got my own savings, and that's the only money.
The only money I see, sort of made me think. My tax account, I'm like, that's not my money. That's VAT and also corporation tax, and I just get very scared at the notion that some scary person could come knocking on my door if I ever didn't pay a bill. I've always paid my tax bills, but
we had a tax investigation. We had a tax investigation going back 7 years.
What? Oh, can you talk to us a bit about this?
Yeah, I
think we all hear about it, but what?
Yeah. So one thing I would say is you can talk to your accountant and get insurance for the accountancy fees for tax investigation.
Okay.
You can't get insurance for fines or anything like that, but you can get insurance because this investigation took 6 months and hundreds of hours. They went back through every invoice for 7 years.
Oh, is that why they say to you, you've got to save all your expense receipts?
I mean, I don't know why, because everything's electronic now. But so my accountant, I had 3 calls with what I would say was a lovely person from HMRC. They really were. And I said, look, this isn't personal. This is your job. I understand. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't understand the letter you sent me or the language you've just used. I'm going to get my accountant to deal with it. Then I had a call with her and my accountant at one point during the investigation. I answered some questions and I spoke to her at the end and I thanked her. And I was very, she's just doing her job. She's not, she doesn't pick on me. She's given a name and she picks up the phone and, I thought it was a scam at first. So anyone who hasn't got tax investigation insurance, please get it.
How much did it cost you?
£200 a year. I think mine's £179.
But the accountant fees for that period of time for the investigation?
17,500.
What? £17,500?
6 months of investigation, Kirsty, and phone calls and spreadsheets, and they had to go through all their records. In the end, it was with tax and stuff. It was about 17.5, that's 17.8 or something. Yeah.
Oh my God, I wasn't expecting
that spare, and you can't write that off against your tax bill next year.
What?
Professional services. So I don't believe so. Anyway, so I had the insurance, I was fine.
Yeah.
What I would say is, for me, my father, who ran his own business after he retired, he said, have your books ready and open. So if they knock at the door at 2 a.m, you can just sit them down with a cup of tea and they can go through them. I don't do anything that could in any way be questioned. And
Yeah.
what I did do something wrong when they did the investigation. They found that, and it was during COVID, we were having some renovation work done. Some of it was stuff for work and some of it wasn't. And I used the builder that was building something for the Innovation Beehive to put some panes of glass into a greenhouse for me in the garden. And when the invoice came in, I just paid the bottom number. And a line in that was for glass in garden greenhouse. And the HMRC rightly picked that up and said, how's that a business expense? And I said, it's not, I'm sorry. And it was done during COVID when my world was falling apart. And they were lovely. They said, we completely understand. Because there's different levels they can fine you at, depending on whether they think you're being sneaky, whether you're being malicious, whether you're being lazy, whatever, or, incompetent. And they were like, look, we're not going to charge you any interest. You owe us the tax you claimed on that. And we're done. And after 7 years, I had incorrectly declared £179. Awesome. And I think that's fine. I'm sure all of us have made a small mistake.
Yeah.
Every now and then.
How did they pick
but I will
that up?
have to say, well, it's forensic, that's their job. And good for them, because that means we get nurses and doctors, and we have school teachers being paid, and we have police, and we have roads being... I never mind paying my tax. I never mind paying my tax. Because we cannot have a functioning society unless we pay our tax.
What, so just say again for us, what is the name of the insurance you had with your accountant?
It's tax investigation insurance. Just speak to your accountant.
God, I don't know if I've got that. I'm talking to my accountant.
It's minimal.
Tax.
My renewal just came through this week.
Oh my God, I feel like fear of God's just gone through me. Oh my God, like...
They'll just look at your turnover and then they'll, it'll be fine. You'll be fine. But and lessons learned from running a small business. Yeah. I made that right. I made that. And it was my accountant a few years ago said, I think you should get this. And I'm so tight on costs. I was like, that's a waste of money.
But exactly.
But I did. And I'm so glad.
God, I bet you were. Are there any other insurances we should be aware of?
Obviously, public liability.
Yeah, we have to have those. Because
with associate work, I do associate work for a business school, as you know, and I have to have that as well.
Yeah.
And if I give poor advice and someone chooses to sue me, then,
we have that. Is there any other ones? No, those are the main ones, I think. Do you have travel insurance for work?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have an annual that is paid for from the business, and that's for business trips. I have a private one as well. I don't use the same one.
I've never taken...
Because if at any point they say I was in Paris for work, your private insurance would not cover you. I also think you need to look at car insurance as well. Car insurance is important because I have a company car, which I use for personal use. Yeah. I do not have a personal car that I put the expenses of the insurance through on the business, which some people do. The car isn't mine. I've talked to my husband about when he leaves the Innovation Beehive, that car will not be accessible to him unless he has to buy it out from the Beehive.
Yeah.
You don't want to find out that you're not insured if you have an accident in the car as well.
Yeah. So you and I have spoken about like all the different kinds of things we could put through our business. And I went back to my accountant and she wouldn't let me put any of it through the business. So my car is paid personally, and I just claim back the mileage that I use for business.
Mine's a company car. It was bought by the company.
No, I've not done that.
But then I do a significant amount of travel, and my business wouldn't be able to operate unless I could get to multiple points in the UK.
Yeah, that's true.
I am in the next couple of weeks. I'm in London, Birmingham, Nottingham, and obviously Wales.
Yeah. Tell our lovely listeners. So, I love the way he goes, I'm scaling back work, but I also know what else you're up to. What else are you up to in the world?
I am country living with Mock if you're on Instagram, TikTok, or YouTube. So I love living in the countryside, and I believe that there's lots of lessons from slow country living that we can all benefit from. I live and I'm renovating a little castle just outside Abergavenny, and I share that on socials. I started off sharing LGBTQ plus history on socials, but I just enjoyed more, and people enjoyed more when there were glimpses of my life within that.
Yeah.
And I'm really having a great time. I'm one of Meta's rising stars. So I meet with Meta every week to talk about what's going on in the world of social media. And I have about 250,000 people a month who now watch the stuff that I put out there. I'm not interested in getting brand deals I did do one advert for a brand of vitamins that I use, and I felt fine doing that. But I don't want to go and, I don't want to go and do adverts for, I don't know, washing powder or dog.
Well, no, I
shampoo.
think you do Barber jackets and
I would do, well, I would definitely do Barber Jack. Okay,
Colfax
but
and
I'm not doing it. So part of the conversations that we have in our meta groups are about brand deals and stuff. And I just no, I don't. I've got a real community on there, like you do with School of Facilitation. And my reels are, I share the fact that I'm bald as a coot and that this is a wig. This is a ferret on my head. I talk quite openly about being a gay man in your 50s and being representative in the rural countryside in Wales. We're the gays in the village. And people seem to like it. And I think I've got about 23,500 followers now. So
brilliant.
We went a bit crazy when I talked about our house is haunted, and I saw a ghost just before Christmas, and that's when my Instagram certainly got a bit more traction, and we were in the Daily Express, and since then I've just been really enjoying talking about living in and restoring a little castle in Wales.
Oh wow, that's very cool. Right, you and I could carry on talking forever quite easily, but we have to, all good things have to come to an end. We finished with 4 quick fire questions. Are you ready?
I am.
I felt like we just tried to do a random mastermind then. And now for your chosen subject. What advice would you give someone starting out in this world?
In the consulting world?
Yeah.
So don't worry if what you start doing is not what you end up doing. So it's all right that your first workshop looks very, very different from the one you do 6 years later. You will find where your sweet spot and your passion is, and it doesn't matter. It changes.
It does. Who do you follow in social media land that you think others should know about?
So none really in business. I've deliberately unfollowed all of that stuff as I'm starting to as I'm starting to move out of business. So I follow lots of lovely home accounts like House and Garden and things like that. RHS flower shows. So if you want, or you can follow me, country living with Mock.
Have something different in your life other than business. I like that.
Yeah, it's really important.
This might be one for, what book do you recommend that is not to do with houses and country living?
I read a really good book, and it's a bit late to introduce this, but I read a really good book by Louise L. Hay many years ago called You Can Heal Your Life. It's a classic self-help book. And I had a difficult relationship with my parents around my sexuality. And that book allowed me to say, your parents did the best job they knew how to do. And that's all. And I read that book when I was in my early 20s working in Channel 4. And it served me well for the rest of my life. So if you ever have any unresolved issues with individuals, I would recommend You Can Heal Your Life.
I love that. How have you invested in yourself or your business, or your business, to support you in moving forward?
Well, I think I've had a really strong conversation with myself around who do I want to be, and I've also taken a decision to take time for me and for my health. I'm vegan. As I said, I go to the gym quite a lot. And there's nothing better in terms of getting energy than putting a bulb in the ground and then months later seeing it come up in the cottage garden as a wonderful iris.
That's very true. I've just did a little walk around my garden. I've decided I've only seemed to grow very tall flowers and plants. I've got nothing at ground level. I was just
well, that thing is that what you that will come in the next year. So you start, like, I've just got a new 20-meter bed out there called the cottage garden, and there's lots of individual, like a clump of irises and stuff, but there's no ground cover. Ground cover will come next. We can chat ground cover.
We can talk ground cover. Thank you, Mark. Thank you so much for being my guest today. It's been a lovely conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and enjoy the scaling back and the slowing down and your beautiful baby castle.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Bye. And breathe, everybody. That was a whirl through Mock's world, which was an honour. It was interesting. Actually, when we finished recording, we carried on chatting, obviously. And one of the things he shared was he felt like he'd spent his work life living in the future, because that's what you do as an innovator. You're looking for future ideas. And then in his personal life, his passion in his personal life was living with history, because he's been known as the gay aristo, and he took all things LGBTQ plus history. And he said he realized he wasn't living in the present. And that's very much where he's going to now, is like, well, what am I doing for me? Like, what makes me really happy? So it's not my business. It's not this other part of me that's all about the history. And I thought, yeah, how many of us actually do live in the present and what it is that we want? So I'm for always living in the future. I rarely live in the past. I definitely live in the future. I've been thinking about SoFest, which is only 2 weeks away as of recording this podcast. So I hope you found that interesting, that conversation, listening to someone talk about how they're going to leave, how they're going to scale back. I think there's some really sensible advice in there, that when we're starting, we can change our story anytime. We can change the narrative. Do we, though? Because it can be quite scary. But I really like the sort of sensible, clear thinking, which is one, well, what do you want your life to look like? And then once you know that, what's it going to cost, basically, and get a spreadsheet out, which, whilst for those of you who couldn't see, if you weren't watching on YouTube, I was rolling my eyes. The thought of a spreadsheet, it's true, isn't it? Like, that's what you probably need to know, the financials. So I'd love to hear from anyone else who's going through maybe a scale down in their consultancy, or even going towards retirement. Drop me a DM. I'd love to hear from you. I forgot to ask Mock how you can follow him, but if you look up Mock O'Keefe on Instagram, you will find him. Country Living with Mock is what his handle is. So go find him there and give him some love. Also, please give this podcast some love. So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please give it a star, a like, a thumbs up, and share it with other people in your world. That helps us get our numbers. And also, the more people that like our podcast, the more people get to hear about the podcast. You know what I'm saying. Anyway, thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you on the pink chair in the future.